I still remember the exact moment I realized we weren't alone in that cabin. It was the sound of breathing, slow, deliberate, coming from just outside the frost-covered window. My breath hung in the air as I pressed my face against the cold glass, searching the darkness beyond. Nothing. Just endless snow and skeletal pines swaying in the wind. But that breathing, it was there. Real. And it knew we were listening. Winter cabins are supposed to be refuges from the cold, sanctuaries where families gather and friends reconnect. But sometimes these isolated structures become prisons. Sometimes what waits in the frozen wilderness isn't the cold you need to fear. These are 3 terrifying true stories that prove winter's darkness hides more than just the absence of light. Story 1, The Watcher in the Woods. In January 2019, Marcus and his college friends rented a cabin in northern Maine for a weekend ski trip. The place was perfect, secluded, affordable, surrounded by miles of untouched forest. They arrived Friday evening as snow began to fall, thick and heavy, blanketing everything in white silence. The first night passed normally. They drank, played cards, laughed too loud in that way people do when they're trying to fill up empty space. But Saturday morning, Marcus noticed something strange. Footprints in the snow, fresh ones, leading from the tree line directly to their cabin windows, then back into the forest. Not animal tracks, human. Barefoot? Who walks barefoot in 2 feet of snow? His friend Jake asked, staring at the prints. They were deep, deliberate. Someone had stood at each window, one by one, looking in while they slept. They searched the area, but found nothing. No abandoned boots, no explanation. They convinced themselves it was a prank, maybe locals messing with tourists. But that night, around 2 a.m., Marcus woke to tapping. Gentle at first, then insistent. Tap, tap, tap. On his window, he opened his eyes to see a face pressed against the glass. Pale, gaunt, eyes reflecting the moonlight like an animal's. But it was human, or had been. The thing smiled, its breath fogging the window and raised one bare, frost-bitten hand. Then it was gone. Marcus screamed. His friends rushed in, but the window showed only darkness and those same barefoot tracks, now circling the entire cabin. They barricaded the doors and waited until dawn, listening to footsteps crunching through snow, around and around for hours. When light finally came, they packed and left. The caretaker they called later said the previous renters had reported the same thing. He'd stopped mentioning it in the listing. Winter cabins attract more than just vacationers. They attract those who never left the cold. Story 2, The Knocking Pattern. Sarah's family had owned their Colorado cabin for 3 generations. She'd spent every Christmas there since childhood. It was tradition, safety, home, until December 2020, when she went up alone to prepare the place for the holidays. The cabin sat at the end of a 4-mile private road, accessible only by snowmobile in winter. True isolation. Sarah arrived Wednesday afternoon, started a fire, unpacked supplies. Everything felt normal, familiar. That night, the knocking started. 3 sharp raps on the front door. She looked through the peephole, nothing but swirling snow. She called out, no answer. 3 more knocks, louder. She grabbed her phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. There never was up here. The knocking moved. To the back door, 3 raps. To the side window, 3 raps. Methodical, purposeful, circling the cabin like a predator testing for weakness. Shh. Who's there? Sarah shouted, her voice cracking. The knocking stopped. In the silence, she heard it, her grandfather's voice, clear as day, calling her name from outside. Sarah, honey, let me in. It's so cold. Her grandfather had been dead for 5 years. She'd scattered his ashes on this very property. The voice continued, patient and kind, exactly as she remembered. Please, Sarah, I just want to come home. 3 more knocks. She backed away from the door, tears streaming down her face, because part of her wanted to open it. Wanted so badly to see him again. But she didn't. She huddled by the fire until morning, while that voice pleaded and the knocking continued, 3 raps at a time, until the first light of dawn silenced it completely. She left that day and hasn't returned. The cabin still stands, waiting. Still part of the family. But Sarah knows better. Now some traditions should be broken. The mountains remember everyone who dies in them. And sometimes they send them home. Story 3, The Frozen Figure. In February 2021, Daniel rented a cabin in rural Vermont for a solo writing retreat. He wanted quiet, inspiration, distance from screens and people. He got more isolation than he bargained for. The blizzard hit his second night. Within hours, 3 feet of snow had fallen, trapping him completely. No power. No heat except the fireplace. He settled in, figuring he'd wait it out. Then he saw through the window, a figure standing in the clearing, perfectly still, covered in snow. At first he thought it was a tree he hadn't noticed before, but trees don't stand in clearings. As he watched, it moved, one step closer, then stopped. Became still again, letting snow accumulate on its shoulders, its head. Daniel watched it for an hour. It would take a step every 10-15 minutes, always toward the cabin, always stopping, freezing in place, becoming part of the landscape. By midnight, it was halfway across the clearing. He could see it was human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, arms too long. He stopped looking. Barricaded himself in the bedroom, fed the fire, tried to sleep, but the scraping started around 3 a.m., something dragging across the cabin's exterior, slow, methodical, and breathing that same deliberate breathing from my story, right outside the wall. When dawn broke and the snow stopped, Daniel looked outside. The figure was gone. But pressed into the snow beside every window were handprints, if you could call them that. 8 fingers instead of 5. He was rescued that afternoon by snowplow crews. He never found out what it was. Neither did I, because that last story, that was mine. I was Daniel. Because that last story, that was mine. I was Daniel. I changed the name, the years, and details, but that thing in the snow, those prints with too many fingers, that was real. That happened to me, and I still don't go anywhere isolated in winter. I still check my windows every night, because whatever walked out of that blizzard is still out there, waiting in the cold, patient as the winter itself. If these stories made your skin crawl, if you feel that same primal fear staring into the winter darkness, hit that like button and subscribe, because the cold never truly leaves, and neither do the things that live in it.